Is your practice tired of wrestling with insurance denials, deciphering EOBs, and watching your revenue slip through the cracks? You are not alone. Welcome to The Claim Game, the podcast designed to cut through the confusion and provide you with the best practices for revenue cycle management success. We are Jeremy and Kathryn Zug, and we've been with people just like you in the trenches. Each week, we'll break down complex billing processes, share real-world solutions from practices like yours, and ask questions of the game makers and changers of healthcare so you can take control of your revenue. Let's turn those claim denials into deposits and help you return to focusing on patient care. It's time to win the claim game.
Hey everyone, welcome back to The Claim Game. As a reminder, we're going through the revenue cycle management best practices, and last time around the table we spoke with Dan King, who told us different benefits of selecting your payer list. If you haven't heard that episode, it's really, really good, so go back and give that a listen.
Round four.
We are currently focused on the credentialing territory on the board, which is the home base that we are stuck in, that you are stuck in until we establish the payers with in-network contracts, our game partners.
Quick reminder, if you missed the initial setup and want to understand the full scope of the board and what we're saying when we say 6 domains of billing and how they work together, be sure to check out round 1 for the complete overview.
Yeah, so here's an introduction to our revenue cycle management category today is credentialing application completion. And today we're going to zoom in on the credentialing application completion, and we'll cover the first 2 stages of the credentialing process in a lot more detail. Information gathering and application completion primarily. So let's get ready to analyze its unique challenges and discover the optimal moves to conquer it. Let's strategize. This is going to be really fun. So we spent some time discussing these 2 stages of the credentialing process in round 3. So what makes this more valuable to our listeners today, Kathryn?
A good question. I don't think this is going to be, I'm going to be really honest, Jeremy. I don't think this is going to be a very entertaining episode, aside from our cheap efforts at making it entertaining, because this is a very tactical, very information-heavy episode. But I hope it's really strategic in nature. The third round was more of an educational overview, and in this round, I'm hoping to provide more tools and strategies. But there are a lot of lists in this episode.
So get ready, get your pen out and your paper. We're going to make some lists. So,
yeah.
Kathryn, what does success for these processes look like? Let's just start with the end in mind.
Yeah, so we're kind of going to cover stage 1 of credentialing and stage 2. And so for information gathering stage 1, I want you to leave this episode feeling like you have a clear picture of when to collect provider information, how to collect provider information, what to collect, and who will be collecting this information on behalf of the practice. And then for credentialing application completion, stage 2, you should leave the episode with clear steps for organizing your payer information with application information and a plan for completing applications for your practice.
Yeah, it seems like a good goal for this particular round. So where do we start?
Well, let's talk about information gathering.
Very important.
I would be remiss if I did not mention the Hourglass Learning Hub at Practice Solutions. Many of the resources that I'm actually going to mention in today's episode can be found there. And I don't say that necessarily to plug the Learning Hub, but more so because we have spent a lot of time creating these tools with the expertise that we've been gathering over almost the last decades. Check that out. You can check that out on our website, practicesol.com. And there should be a tab for the Learning Hub. It's called the Hourglass Learning Hub. So whether you are outsourcing your credentialing, which we talked about in round 3, I think, or you're doing it in-house, you need an internal process for consolidating practice and provider information. There is a tool in the Learning Hub called the Credentialing Document Checklist, which is a place to consolidate all of this information to keep on file. You don't have to use it, but it is a tool that exists to consolidate that very information.
What information should practice and practice owners have consolidated.
Right. So we're just talking about the practice right now, not the provider information. So for your practice, you need to have the following. And this is where we're going to start making lists.
Yeah, get your pen out. And if you're driving, don't get your pen out.
Come back. Your legal business name with or without a doing business as, the owner's names, a link to your articles of organization. With everything that I'm about to say, you're going to need supporting documentation. So I'm going to mention that as we go. Your practice address, the physical location, your practice start date, your type 2 NPI, a link to your NPPS documentation, your EIN, which is your tax ID if you didn't know, a link to your EIN paperwork, and a link to your practice liability insurance. That's just your demographic information. Now, I'm going to say you're going to need your bank information, the name of your bank, the name of the account holder, and a link to a voided check, which will have your account and routing numbers on them. And then you need contact information because you might not be the one that manages this information. And so the insurance company is going to want to have the name of an office manager on file, name, phone, and email for that person, and a billing contact, whether you outsource your billing, have someone in-house, or you yourself are the billing contact. You need to have someone listed as a billing contact, name, phone, and email, and then your office hours. That's how they're going to know when to call you. Then you need service information, so CPT codes that are commonly used in your office with a description of all of the services that are used. If you have a bunch of providers and cumulatively they do a bunch of different things, you have to include all of those CPT codes within that section. And then you will need disabled accessibility information. Do you have any information about why that is part of the standard?
Yeah, for some buildings, a lot of buildings have to meet ADA standards for restrooms and ramps. And yeah, people seeking medical help come in all shapes and sizes, and we want to really care about whether or not you can serve the breadth of the population, especially as our population starts to age, right? The boomers are starting to get a little older. It's an important accessibility requirement. I mean, in whatever clinical service you provide, right? If you're doing it like Georgia the Jungle style on some kind of vine somewhere, it's probably going to be an issue for a lot of people.
Well, I would say too, I don't think that this section exists necessarily to eliminate you. You don't have to have this accessibility information. Like your answer to all of these questions might be no.
Could be.
But it's just, it helps them know. I think that they want the diversification and to know where accessibility is.
That's
so you'll
right.
need physical accessibility information. Do you have ramps? Do you have an elevator? Do you have ADA accessible restrooms? Communication accessibility. So this would be more for hearing impaired people. So do you have resources for the hearing impaired? And then website and technology accessibility, alternative text and images, and ADA accessibility. All of this information will be needed to establish your initial group contract with the insurance company. And this will represent the standard information that should be very consistent on every application with every payer for which you credential.
That's great. That's great. So is that all the that's a complete list of all the information that practice owners need to have?
It is all you need for the credentialing application, though I would recommend adding 2 more things. And a place for your payer list chart that has your payer names, portal links, credentialing application links, and files, if applicable. And of course, change form files, which are different. And then 2, a place for your payer portal logins with the usernames and passwords. We're going to talk a little bit more about both of those when we get closer to the end of this episode. But you'll want to consolidate your information somewhere. This is just your practice information. This isn't going to get you in network fully because you also have to have a provider's information. But as far as what your practice needs, it's, I would say, mostly comprehensive.
That's great. That's great. So the goal then, Kathryn, for information gathering was to give practice owners confidence around collecting and applying provider information. But what we've discussed so far is just practice information, right?
Yes, the practice information I've mentioned above should all be consolidated into that single document that I talked about. And then it would be ideal to get all of this together right at the commencement of your practice, which I'm sure we're talking to people that have been in practice for a while, but you can gather this information at any time. The goal is efficiency. Get everything in one place So that reference is very easy. This is a one-time task that you will just want to audit annually for updates.
It should be a one-time task.
It should be, yes. The provider information would ideally be collected within the first week of a provider's employment with your practice, or better yet, in advance of an official start date.
Yes, get it before. So we recently heard of a practice that will submit credentialing applications months in advance of their official employment.
Yeah, I've heard that too, and I want to know, do you think that that is a good practice?
Yeah, I mean, theoretically, for sure. And I think that there are some practices where the practice owner has become so dialed in to the operations of their practice, and when they engage with a provider to have them provide services for that practice, if you can trust that they're actually going to start, their information that they give you is reliable, that you can get the process started with a high degree of fidelity, knowing that it's all going to come to fruition. I couldn't think of a better process than that. And so it'd be a phenomenal gold standard to aim for in the life of your practice.
Yeah, I think in my mind, there are a couple of things that you need to have in place to ensure I can tell, like, there's some risk that you're referring to. So have an employment agreement on file, but usually someone is leaving another practice and they have a caseload that they can continue seeing patients as they're transitioning to the other practice, because we all know credentialing takes probably, let's just say the average is 6 to 8 months.
Yeah, that's right.
Why it would be very difficult to jump to like start the process after you started at this practice. I mean, it doesn't.
You have to know ahead of time for sure.
So talking more about this, if you are able, have a practice admin sit with the new provider physically, and you will have a form of sorts to complete while also looking at the provider's CAQH account with them. If they do not yet have a CAQH account, now would be the time to do this.
Yeah, remind the listeners and providers and practice owners what CAQH is if they don't know, and why that's important.
So CAQH is an information sharing hub that many insurance companies use to review and verify provider information and credentials. It's meant to save you time by requiring the provider to upload all of their information and all of that supporting documentation that I was talking about in one place, but it can be accessed by many insurance companies. So you have to fill it in once, and then all of these insurance companies can see your CAQH account. So here's the tricky thing. You are not supposed to share your login information with anyone as a security measure. So the option that I'm putting forward is sit with the admin to hold the provider's hand through this process. This is a great solution. And this option can help increase consistency and thoroughness of information gathering, because if you have the same admin collecting this information over and over and over again every time someone's hired, they know exactly what to do, where to go, how to navigate. So you kind of have a I'm not going to say expert, but more than you probably.
Yeah, more management for sure. So what information or what should be gathered, right? There's a lot of information that the insurance company may require. We use our credentialing document checklist as a starting point for collecting information, but having CAQH open is helpful as well, because you're likely going to need to provide additional information.
Yeah, before you know what you need to provide to the insurance companies, you first need to know if the provider is currently credentialed with any of the payers on your practice's payer list. So any of your in-network payers. If they are, you may not need to do a full application.
That's interesting.
So this is before we start collecting data,
right?
In my expertise.
And there can be problems if you do submit a full application for someone who's already established, right?
Absolutely. There can be some major delays in the credentialing process, or there can be major issues later with your billing. If you have a provider that is established at 2 different practices without that being known in advance, there are correct ways to do that if you need to maintain your status in multiple locations or practices, but it's first important to confirm that information before taking next steps. So you will want to know if they are in fact credentialed and with what information. Then you can narrow down what information or even which application type is needed. But generally, here are some of the things that may be required on an application for an individual provider. Get out that notebook again, because here we go. So first we have this category of provider identifying information. So we need a full legal name, a driver's license, which is your supporting documentation, your type 1 NPI, link that to your NPPES documentation or a link to that, your social security number, your social security card, an image, your provider type, which can be multiple things, employment start date with the practice, linked to your professional liability or malpractice insurance, any professional licenses that you have obtained and their start dates, expiration date, and state of issue, and a link to any of your licenses. Then we move into provider education. So now you have to tell them that you are qualified from an educational standpoint. You will need your undergraduate name and address, a link to your diploma, any graduate school name or names and addresses, and link to those diplomas. And then any additional education or certifications and links to those. So if you are highly schooled, you will probably have a lot of those. And then you will need professional references, at least 3 professional references with contact information and the actual reference letters. And then we talked about this in the practice information, but the services that you render by CPT code and description. It does not need to be a comprehensive list that matches the practice, but it has to be stuff that exists on the practice list. So make sure that you're not giving services that they're not already contracted to give. And then you have to provide who will cover you in case of absence. So the name of at least one, but a couple professional colleagues who can cover your work in case of an absence. I would say this absence, like, think about it I'm a woman, so it's a little bit easier to think about like a maternity leave, but who is going to take your patient caseload in your absence? Probably also depends on your specialty, but if you're out of the office and you have a full book of appointments and someone else can step in and provide very comparable services, that's who you would be putting down. Called sick, kids got a fever, who knows? You will need to provide your criminal and civil history, which includes any criminal convictions and pending charges, any indication of civil lawsuit or disciplinary action related to your professional career. And then more information is just going to be requested. If any of this is true, you will likely have to do a background check, provide court records and your licensing records. And then you can list any patient limitations. So if there are certain demographics or presenting
Diagnoses.
problems that a patient has that you don't feel that you can safely or effectively treat due to your training, experience, disciplinary action, health, etc. If so, list those limitations and the description of the limitation. You may need to provide supporting documentation for a limitation if requested. And then you need to, within your specialty, provide your treatment modalities, anything that you would do to treat patient.
Yeah, so that's a lot of information. We know that talking about credentialing can feel like talking about colonoscopies or even your least favorite relative. Yeah, what else is there, Kathryn, by way of information? Is there anything else that we need to collect?
Like I said, I think it's very helpful. What I've just gone over is what we collect in the document checklist. It is probably not everything that CAQH is going to require. I anticipate that this would easily be a half-day meeting.
Easily.
It's a good idea to give the provider a list of what is going to be asked and the supporting documentation that they will need to provide so that they can come to this meeting prepared so that it doesn't take longer unnecessarily. So what I just provided, that would be a good list to give to the provider ahead of time, and then you're going to sit with them and their admin would be the one maybe putting it all in the right place in CAQH and making sure that it's properly uploaded. And then they're going to also use CAQH prompts to gather any of that additional information. This episode was brought to you by the Hourglass Learning Hub. We know that managing your practice's revenue cycle can feel complex. That's why Practice Solutions has built the Hourglass Learning Hub, a comprehensive platform designed to simplify every aspect of your billing machine. We've organized foundational knowledge across 6 critical domains: credentialing, patient registration, eligibility and benefits, payment posting, aging follow-up, and claim submission. Each piece is vital, and we've compiled revenue cycle management educational articles for a clear understanding of how they all interconnect, giving you those aha moments you've been waiting for. For practical application, dive into our DIY billing resources, the very tools and templates our own team uses to help you proactively manage claims and optimize cash flow. And when you hit a roadblock, our Ask the Biller feature provides a direct channel to our seasoned experts for personalized video responses to your gnarly billing questions. If you're ready to take decisive control of your practice's financial health, explore the Hourglass Learning Hub today. Become a member of the Hourglass Learning Hub to access these awesome resources. For the Claim Game listeners only, we are offering 15% off the annual membership, which means you can have access to all these resources today for only $425 for the year. Click the link in the show notes to get started today.
Amazing. So we're going to assume the when of information gathering is done before the employment start date or within the first week. Shoot for the stars there, practice owners. How is by physically sitting down with an admin to collect all of that information and add it to CAQH. The what is all that was discussed previously to this point, plus any additional CAQH prompts. And the who is a practice admin, somebody who's going to really corral the cats, right? At this point, is that right?
Yeah, I mean, we all know that admin that can just get stuff done.
Yeah.
That's who should be doing this. So yes, and even if you have an outsourced credentialer to do this, they're going to need the same information that we've just discussed. And so it's good for you to have it on record with your practice in a private provider folder. Private as in this would be like only accessible to human resources or locked away and it wouldn't be a public folder, but yeah, you need to have this information whether you do it outsourced or not. So might as well understand what's being collected. Then we move to actually completing the application, and you should have all you need to do this. Although there is one additional resource at this point that I either recommend you create or grab from our Learning Hub, and that is the Credentialing Application Follow-Up Log.
Super helpful.
This is a place where you can track the status of each individual application, which is invaluable, especially if you're submitting multiple applications at a time. It will help you track progress with the individual application, track long-term KPI metrics for your practice, and give you some foundational information for organizing your practice's credentialing statuses long-term, which is a must for billing. In this log, you're going to track the insurance company, the provider's name, the current status of the application, the initial submission date, and then you're going to set goals. When am I going to follow up again at a minimum? And then a place for notes, because when we take notes, we always date and initial the updates, and we don't leave a phone call with the representative without a reference number. So all of that should be in your notes field once you move to application follow-up. For now, this just serves to get you set up for success in application follow-up. As soon as you submit an application, it should go on your log. As you complete and submit an application, you add the previously mentioned information. All of that I've just mentioned will go on that log.
So that makes a lot of sense, since things can, especially when you work with insurance companies, all of this data and information can become very difficult to track rather quickly, especially for some of you who are listening. And I know you're there, that you are credentialed with 10, 15, maybe 20 insurance companies. So you're managing a lot of information. So this is a very helpful setup for you, especially those of you that are not particularly organized. So we're helping you get organized. How do we actually go about completing the applications?
Okay, so I mentioned a payer list chart in round 3 that is vital to finishing the application completion. I also mentioned it earlier in this episode. If you take anything away from this episode at all, it is the value of preparation and documentation. Your static practice payer list that is just for your practice should be a list of all your in-network providers first and foremost. Then it should have, there's going to be an image that's going to come up so that you can see this too, and I'll link it in the show notes, but it is part of the credentialing document checklist that I mentioned. You need a list of all your in-network payers, so the name of the insurance company, a link to their portal, a link to if they have a credentialing page on their website, a blank application file or link. So depending on the type of technology that exists at this insurance company, they're either going to have a fillable PDF that you have to fill out and submit, or they're going to have an online form. And technology has come a long way, but I can't guarantee that they're going to have it all in the portal. So you're either going to get a link to where that exists in the portal or on the website, or you're going to get a link to the actual fillable PDF. And you're going to link that to this chart that I'm talking about. And then you also want to get their version of their change form, which is usually an abbreviated version of the entire application. And that also should be linked. And then again, a place for notes. You need a place for notes because you are going to learn so much. It's going to be trial by fire, I promise. So if you don't have this information, start there, because then it's just a matter of opening the links or forms and filling them out with all the information you have already prepared meticulously. You can also save all this information in a more accessed document like a spreadsheet with all of your payer information. We use something at Practice Solutions called the Insurance Contact Reference, which is a spreadsheet where you keep all of your payers. And then you have information about eligibility and benefits and the best way to get that information, about claim follow-up and the best way to get that information. And then I would recommend for this application that you also have a place to keep credentialing notes. How do I submit forms? Were there parts of the application where I had to call and say, I don't understand what this is asking for? Write that down. And then at Practice Solutions, we also recommend that every practice have something called a credentialing matrix, which is a spreadsheet documenting how every provider in your practice is credentialed.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, and here's the other reason why this stuff is important, folks. Your admin and your biller or your credentialer that's potentially in-house or maybe even outsourced may not always be there. So all this meticulous information that Kathryn's talking about keeping, I know it sounds like you're going to become this mad scientist person, but the moment that somebody turns over and they don't have any of that written down, you're going to wish they did.
You're probably also like, Kathryn, that's a lot of spreadsheets. That doesn't sound like fun or that I can manage that properly. It is a lot of spreadsheets. There are 3 that I've mentioned so far. And I will say they all have different purposes. And if you go to the Hourglass Learning Hub, you will see how they all work together. It's very comprehensive.
Yeah. So there's likely not much information you can provide beyond what you've just mentioned, right?
Yeah, not really for application completion. Every insurance company is going to have different requirements. If you have a plugin that can take all the information you've provided and move it to the correct fields on the application, more power to you. But otherwise, it's all about getting everything properly prepared and documenting what was done for future reference. It's a game of constant improvement.
Yeah, that's fair. Having the links to the correct paperwork and instructions for submission is probably the most important. Actually, filing the application is just administrative. It kind of feels a little bit like when we hear folks say, well, isn't billing just submitting a claim? Isn't that how it feels?
Kind of. I mean, once you have all the information, you fill it in and submit it according to the instructions you've obtained. And like I said, if you hit any roadblocks and you aren't 100% sure what to answer in a specific field, flag it, skip it for now. Once you've finished everything, compile a list of those flags, call an insurance representative to make sure you're entering the correct information. And then, like I said, document it in that notes section for next time. So that next time when you're like, what in the heck is this asking me? You can write the exact verbatim text and you can say equals this information and you have it for next time. So you do not have to call and waste your time every time. And that's all I have to say on credentialing application completion.
That's great.
If you do all these things, you will be in optimal formation, so to speak.
And
that's the name, and that's a play on the words of the name of this episode. But Jeremy, can you take us through a case study card for someone who has either done this part of credentialing process really well or really poorly, so we can learn a little bit more about what the ramifications of not doing this process correctly is?
Yeah, I'm going to take you through a case study card that demonstrates how you don't get paid through bad application submission. Today, we've got a little bit of a doozy. So it's one of those head scratchers that turn into a real headache for a clinician. So it's kind of a classic, right? We think we've seen it all, but sometimes a situation reminds us just how many layers there are to this whole claim game situation. And this story comes from a clinician that was in Wixom, Michigan, who was really struggling. She worked with our billers, and we noticed a particular set of claims in her aging report just kept hitting this brick wall. I mean, denied, follow up, calling the government, calling the payer, calling the plan, calling. And eventually what we heard was that this particular clinician was not credentialed properly with the government plan. So the way that she had structured her credentialing was incorrect. It wasn't just a little off, but it was fundamentally misaligned, which meant that the claims are going to deny. And for this particular government entity, you couldn't bill the patient. So she's doing free work, right? So it's like a classic, you're in network, but not really in network for this particular plan, which is a little bit of a, like, now you see me, now you don't. So
she was credentialed, but not with that specific line of business that her patients were using?
Yeah.
So there's some sort of carve out or something?
Yeah. It was something like that. And so we had to go through quite a few claims and many conversations with this clinician, but she was convinced that she was credentialed properly. And again, we went on, like, that conversation went on for a very long time.
I think I remember.
Yeah, that it's like, you're not credentialed properly.
Here's a picture that shows that you're not credentialed.
Yes, screenshots, the whole lot.
Yes.
And eventually, after all of that discussion, finally, the application was submitted correctly. But here's the trick, right? And this is the case study in this situation. This clinician did months of services for this particular patient and several others that were involved in this particular line of business, couldn't bill the patients. And so we had to write off, it was a lot of money in claims that could have been avoided if we had just gained the clarity that we needed to, that Kathryn's talking about here, that if you had a precise picture of where you're going, you can avoid writing off hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. And some of you do tens of thousands of dollars worth of volume. And so,
yeah, and my guess is that she just didn't check a box on her form.
I'm sure that's
like,
about
do you
as
want to
easy
be
as it got.
included in all of these particular lines of business? And she probably didn't check the boxes.
Yeah. So you need to make absolutely sure that when you fill out these applications, yes, you get the provider demographic information right. You get the practice demographic information correct. You make sure that all your CPT codes are updated, but make sure you're reading these applications before you submit them. Otherwise, it is very possible, months of services that you eventually have to write off.
And this is what I mean by keeping a credentialing matrix. At the end of this process, you want to know how you're credentialed and with what plans, not just what companies, but there are plans within the companies. And it's okay if you don't want to be in network with all of them, but you have to know which ones you're in network with, because when someone walks in with a card that says, let's say it says Medicaid, but then there's a carve out, you need to know that that carve out either is or isn't something that you can accommodate.
100%. So this is one of those curveballs that you get occasionally on this journey, in this game, right? And we don't want you to get tricked up here. I mean, this is one of those, like, go back to home and start over.
You wasted a lot of time.
So we don't want you to do that. So be careful, be meticulous, be thoughtful, be strategic, and make the best, smartest moves that you can.
And documentation.
That's right.
So today we covered the initial steps of the credentialing process, which include information gathering, stage 1, for your practice and providers, and application completion and submission. If you are left with any questions, please reach out to us, as we want to make sure we are providing you with the best information we possibly can. You also heard us mention quite a few resources today regarding initiating steps of the credentialing process. If you'd like to get your hands on any of the specific resources, go to our website, www.practicesol.com, to view the Hourglass Learning Hub, where you can become a member and access all of those resources.
And more.
Yeah, that's all we have for today, though. Thanks, and we'll see you next time. Actually, I wanted to say, next time, episode 6, we're going to talk about application follow-up, so you don't want to miss it.
If you enjoyed today's episode of The Claim Game, please take a moment to leave us a rating and review wherever you listen to your podcasts. It really helps new listeners to find us. Make sure you never miss an episode by subscribing to The Claim Game on your favorite podcast app. Your feedback means so much to us. We want to provide valuable education about revenue cycle management. So if there's something we didn't cover in our topic that was a burning question for you, please let us know so we can try to get you the information you desire. You can find the links to all resources we mentioned in this episode in the show notes. And if you want to dive deeper into our resources, we have 2 places you can do that. First, you can go to our blog at practicesol.com/blog, where we have 8 years of educational blogs. If you want to learn more about what Practice Solutions does, reach out. We'd love to hear from you. Just go to practicesol.com to learn more and to connect with one of our awesome people on our team. Thanks for listening. We are Jeremy and Kathryn Zug, and this is The Claim Game. See you at the game table next time.